BC Cameron was born and raised in Colorado. She started playing guitar in high school. She went on to write songs, record, perform for many years, touring the US, Canada, and Europe. She moved to LA when she was sidetracked for 30 years as an assistant director in the movie and television industry. She's also a lifelong horse enthusiast. Fascinating, life-changing interventions of destiny are sprinkled throughout her experiences, often leading her in unplanned, unalterable directions, not to mention a plethora of stories. Her story today is about one of those serendipitous adventures. BC.
Hi there. Nice crowd. I'm going to tell you a story about things that sometimes happenings that lead you places that you never thought of going, but you know you're supposed to go there. In 1996, I bought the house of my dreams. It was a little house built in 1939 on a little tree-lined street in a tiny enclave of Burbank, unique in the world. A tiny little area where you could still have horses. Little barn in the back, and it was what I'd always dreamed of having. And the nice thing about it was it had a wood-burning fireplace. Always wanted one. So my dream was to have this lovely fireplace with an English hunt print over it, with the little guys with their horses getting ready to go on the hunt, you know? That's what I wanted. Well, the house was old and it needed a lot of work. So I was putting the work into the house, and the fireplace was no exception. I don't know if you're familiar with Z-brick. Z-brick is kind of a pressed masonite or cardboard or something, and it's pressed to look like brick. And that was what was on the front of my fireplace. And it was all cracked and broken, and pieces were falling off. But the rest of the house needed better work, more work done, so I didn't get the fireplace fixed. But in the meantime, for the next year, I looked for my hunt print, the perfect one. Couldn't find it. So one day, I was down at a really fancy-dancy Grand Prix horse jumping competition in San Juan Capistrano. And they had these, on the grass berm, there were these little white tents set up that had little boutiques and little shops and things. And one of them was an art gallery. And I'm walking along, and maybe 30 feet away, I look over, and there's my hunt print. That's the one I wanted. So I walk over, and I'm thinking, I'm way out of my league here. These are little white tents at a fancy horse show. So I walk up, and I'm looking at it, and it's just lovely. And across the bottom, it's a print, it's not a painting, it's a print. And across the bottom it said, "The meet at Blagden." And there were about 8 guys, either on their horses or holding their horses, and there was 30 dogs milling around in the foreground, and this beautiful landscape behind. And way in the far distance, there's a little house. Well, you could tell it wasn't a little house. This was a manor house. But it was so tiny in the back, but you could tell it was a big place. And so I'm looking at this, and the lady walks over, and she says, "May I help you?" And I said, "Well, could you tell me about this print?" "Yes," she said. It's an 1865 hand-painted aquatint of a painting done in 1845 by John Ray Snow. And I said, "How much are you asking for it?" $2,600. I said, well, I really love it, but I can't afford that. Not to mention, I can't put a $2,600 print over my Z-brick fireplace. So for a year, I keep looking for a hunt print, and now that I've seen the one I want, you know I'm never going to find another one. So I keep looking and looking. Finally, one night, about a year later, I went out to dinner with some friends, and we were talking about things you should have bought when you had the chance. I said, well, I should have bought that hunt print. And my friend said, well, why don't you call the gallery? See if she might still have it. I said, it's been more than a year. She said, well, you never know. Can't hurt to ask. So I go home and I dig out her card and I call her and I said, I don't know if you'll remember me, but at the horse show, there was a print called The Meet at Blagden, and I really liked it, and I was wondering if you might still have it, or do you remember me? And she said, oh, I do remember you. I do. She said, I almost called you about a month ago because I still had that print, and I was thinking maybe you might want it. And I said, well, I do. I want it. I'm going to buy it. She said, I sold it 3 weeks ago. Okay, not supposed to be. All right, I got it. So I go home and I'm thinking, you know what? I didn't spend the money on the print. I'll spend the money on fixing my fireplace. So I did. I fixed it up. It had antique brick and old wrought iron things in it. It was gorgeous, completely beautiful. So about a week later, after I get the fireplace fixed, my friend calls me, and she has a little antique thrift store kind of thing up on Magnolia Boulevard in Burbank. She called and said, you know what? We have to stay open on Friday night till 9 o'clock because they're doing a Christmas thing on the street. Could you come help me with my shop? And I said, sure. So my friend and I went that night to help her out, and during the evening, we would go out and go into other little stores and look around, and I made some comment about, isn't it odd in this horse community that I can't find a hunt print that I like? So later in the evening, we went out. We're going up the street to go to this other shop, and we passed this little hole in the wall, little narrow storefront, and the place was packed with junk. And my friend said, oh, let's go in here and look. And I said, hey, it's kind of creepy in there. It's kind of claustrophobic, you know? Oh, it'll just take a minute. Let's go in there and look. And I said, okay. So I go in, and I'm kind of standing in this little narrow walkway, kind of tapping my foot, waiting for my friends to finish. And I look down, and right next to my foot, there's like a stack of pictures standing one in front of the other, probably 50 of them, all framed and kind of old. And I thought, well, while I'm here, I might as well look through these pictures. Maybe I'll find something. So I step back and I look down, and the front picture of that stack was the meet at Blagden. All beautifully framed, gorgeous. Well, I must have made a noise because my friends came over and said, what? What's going on? I said, that's my print. That's the one I've been looking for. And the lady comes over and says, can I help you? And I said, how much do you want for that print? Well, now this is not an old print. This is like from the 1960s, but it's nicely framed. It's very well done. and I want $425. And my friend Virginia, who's the dealer, says, oh, too much. She can't pay that. She can't pay that. Mm-mm. I said, Virginia? Shut your pie hole. So the lady says, all right, I'll take $350. That's the best I can do. Well, I whip out my checkbook and I buy this print, and I take it home, put it over my fireplace, and now that I have it home, I actually have time to study it. And I look at the printing, and then underneath, each of the people that were sitting on their horses or holding their horses is their name. And the one over here was the late M.W. Ridley Bart. And over here is Sir M.W. Ridley Bart and Jack Ridley. And I thought, this is like a real family. These people like maybe really existed, you know? And maybe that house is still there. Maybe it's still in existence. So the next spring, I was taking a vacation to England, and I found a little village called Blagden. I thought, I'm going to go there, and I'm going to see if I can find this family or this house. So I go to Blagden. I have a little photograph of the painting, and I take it to the little, they all have a little grocery store post office there. So I take it in, and I'm showing it to the people, everybody that comes in. Now, I don't know, but you know who'd know? So-and-so would know. And they'd call so-and-so, and they'd come over. Nah, you know who'd know? So-and-so would know. And they'd call so-and-so, and they'd come over. Finally, somebody said, you know who'd know? Olga would know. Olga's our historian. She'd know. So they call Olga. She comes over, and she said, you know, this doesn't look like Southern England. This looks like Northern England, and the word Blagden means Black Hill, and it's very common. But she said, the fact that they have Bart written after their name means that they're a baronet, and they should be listed in Burke's Peerage, which is a book that traces English nobility back to dirt, right? So she says, let me do some research, and I'll check it out. So I get home from my trip, and sure enough, letter from Olga with copies of the pages out of Burke's Peerage with the Matthew White Ridley family in northern England. And they're outside of a little village called Blythe, near Newcastle upon Tyne, if you're familiar. And it's called the Blagden Estate. And she said, if you contact somebody in Blythe, they can tell you about the family. So I did, contacted a guy there. He wrote me back and said, yes, the family very prominent here. The house still is there, and the Matthew White Ridley family still lives there. House was built in 1722. So he gave me an address. I wrote a letter to the Ridley family, told them how I found the painting, and I asked, did they know where the original painting was? And Lord Ridley, he's now a lord in the House of Lords, Lord and Lady Ridley, Lord Ridley wrote me back, sent me information about the estate, told me that they were very thrilled to hear from me. They did have the original painting hanging in the foyer of the house. And he said, my wife and I now live in a smaller house on the estate, Boston House, and my son, Matthew White Ridley, lives in the big house with his 4-year-old son, Matthew White Ridley, and told me all about it and said, if you're ever in England, and you want to come and visit, let us know. Well, the next spring, I was on my way to Ireland. I was producing and directing a documentary in Ireland, and I thought, I'm taking a week ahead, and I'm going to go to the Blagdon estate. So we went. They got us from the train, picked us up. Their farm manager took us out, and I went and had lunch with Lord and Lady Ridley at the Boston House. And then we went up to the house, to the main house, and I met his son, Matt Ridley, who is a world-renowned geneticist, wrote a book called Genome, has written many other books. And they showed me the painting, the original painting, and showed me the house, told me stories about the family, showed me their gardens and the fountains, and it was spectacular. And I left there with an understanding that sometimes we don't know where we're headed, and we don't have control of our lives. And the best thing to do, persevere and go with the flow. And then you find out where you're supposed to be. As a matter of fact, I live in Chino Valley now, and it was one of those Kismet adventures that brought me here. When I lived in Burbank with no intention of moving anywhere, and I lived in Chino Valley 2 months later. A day for another story. Thank you.